Hello, in this demonstration I will present to you CNTF, the portal we created for the state-of-the-art of content negotiation. First, let's start with some context. If I tell you Paris, what comes to your mind? For some, it might be an image of the city of Paris with the Eiffel Tower in the background. For others, it might be an essay they read on a blog. For non-French speakers, even if it is an essay, a text, but it might be in English. Or even a map of the city of Paris. So on the web also a resource, for example here Paris, is identified by a URI and could have different representations. And content negotiation is the mechanism to choose one of these alternatives. With the schema, could say that here the server is in blue and has three different representations: an image, a text, and a map. Under the same under this URI, so example.com/Paris, and the client would request resource Paris, but with the preference for image representation, more specifically a PNG one. So the server will select the image one and send it to the client. As we've seen, we could have not we could negotiate not in the media type dimension, so an image, text, or map, but rather we have the textual representation, but in French and in English. For this, we can use the accept language to request a representation in an English language. Also with HTTP, we have other headers, for example, accept encoding to negotiate the encoding of the representation. So this work was done mainly to answer one of the research questions I'm trying to tackle in my thesis, which is, what are the characteristics of content negotiation use case and how can they be compared and classified? So we identified three main characteristics, starting with the content negotiation dimension. We've seen already the media type dimension to say that I want an image, I want a map, I want text. We have the language dimension to say I want the representation to be in Arabic, in French, in English. We can also negotiate the version dimension because a resource could go through different stages in its life cycle. This is pretty useful in archiving. So we would want to negotiate one specific version of that resource. Also, if we have the same, for example here, media type, so it's a turtle media type describing this resource, but we could use different vocabularies. So we would want to negotiate a specific vocabulary, etc., etc. The second characteristics is the content negotiation style. So how the negotiation is handled, which party is the one that choose the representation to deliver. We have proactive one. The proactive style is the one that we've seen with the schema. It's the server who choose the best representation. We have the reactive representation or the reactive style. Here the server don't choose the alternative but sends a list and it's the client who choose. And we have others: transparent, conditional, active, adaptive. We have also what we call content negotiation constraint conveying means. So how are we going to convey these dimensions, their value? So we have two main techniques: the header-based techniques, the one that we've seen, like we would use accept, for example, for the media type, accept language for the language, encoding, except CRS, it's for the coordinate reference system profile. We can use the URI, so it's a URI based technique. Here we have three approaches: the RK, or the path extension, or also called suffix pattern matching, or the QSA, where we have the URI of our resource, and after the question mark we have the different arguments. So we want a resource to gather all these informations and to satisfy this requirement. We want this resource to be navigable, to have a navigable design, to be extensible, to be categorizable, to be able to categorize these use cases according to these characteristics. And we want it to be maintainable. To this end, we propose the CNTF portal, so the Content Negotiation Theoretical Framework portal. And this is the home screen of our resource, and it is available under this link. If we go to this link, we will have this page. So here on the left we have the nav bar where we can navigate the resource. We have our content negotiation dimensions. We've seen media type, language, the encoding, etc, etc. We have the version here. For each dimension we would have a description, the reference of this dimension, or a reference to the use cases using this dimension, some examples, and references of the state of the art, because this is the purpose of this resource, the state of the art resource. We have the different styles. Also, with each style would have description, example, the advantage and disadvantage of using one style over the other. Also, some relevant references. For example, for the transparent, we have even some scenarios and UML diagrams. Then we will find the headers and URI based, the techniques used to convey the constraints. Most importantly, we have the use cases. Okay, we have the characteristics, but we want a context where how can we use them? So we collected and created some use cases to illustrate these characteristics. So in each use case we would have typically a description, the requirements of this use case, and solutions. For example, here to negotiate the dimensions. The negotiated dimensions here are the media type, the language, and the encoding. To negotiate the media type, we could use the accept header, we could use the accept language for the language, etc. We have links here, useful links, and references. That way, someone wants to implement or to check for solution using content negotiation could check the use cases, find one that is close to the one being under consideration, and check the solutions. Also, if taking these characteristics, we will be able to classify some contributions, already made contributions. For example, here, this reference, this implementation, they are using the proactive style of content negotiation. They are negotiating the capacity dimension. To convey this dimension, they are using headers. Here they are using the HTTP protocol, but for others they might be using other protocols, for example CoAP here. this table is meant to be growing over time, and for each row we'll have a description to have the rationale why we choose this categorization. Our resource also we have an ontology for our resource. So here we are using WebVol to visualize it, but we can check it under this link. Here we are using payload to create this documentation, but if we want let's say a turtle representation, not an HTML representation, we could use this plugin, for example, and this one will add some accept header, so it will negotiate the turtle representation. So if we refresh here, we will have the turtle representation. Also, we have a knowledge graph, our resource, that can be found under CNTS/KG. And for the implementers, under the server implementation tab, we can find for now two ways to implement content negotiation. For example, how can we activate content negotiation in the Apache server? How can we negotiate in Spring Framework? Also, under methodology, you will find the methodology taken to pursue this work. And in the terminology one, you can find terms with their respective definitions along with the reference, because different terms might mean different things to different communities. So here we are providing references where it applies. And in each step in the resource, for example, in the use cases, if we take the RDF shapes, because this is one of the next steps, is to use to go beyond simple content negotiation, but have fine-grained content negotiation. For example, we want to negotiate RDF shapes or some vocabularies. So here we are proposing a solution using shackle and checks. And you can find some how other communities relate to this use case. So for example, here we can find the data extends community, how they are defining their use case, which is in relation with ours. Also, as I said, in all our resource, you can find the reference part, where there is references to have additional information and to go beyond the description provided here. For example, going to this one, you will be redirected to the reference page, and you can check the abstract. You can go to this specific, for example, here it's a working group node, and you can check the all the references here, also filtering them if this suits you.